My farts should still smelly. Just side note. That was an overshare. I'm gonna mute.
Okay, so yeah, song of the day, Bring Me Back to Life, classic song. That'll be the name of our lesson. So first notes, I guess, yeah, we'll get Discord tomorrow, because then we're not paying for this month. And does everybody have 2.8 right now?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Nice.
Let me just clarify what version of Unreal I have.
Yeah, like the Unreal's not that important. Like, we're not going to be doing anything groundbreaking with the latest one. Yeah, that's literally just to drop stuff in and see if our scale is like working and if our modular assets are working. We can get real fancy into that later. I'm thinking after this, the next series is going to be level design and like Unreal. So after Blender, we can learn Unreal. So if you guys want to learn anything or whatever, just let me know and we can try to figure it out. And yeah, but for right now, we'll start with Blender. I don't really want to call it quite like a Blender course, because it's going to be a lot of like modeling theory. And essentially what you're doing as a 3D modeler is you're kind of just sculpting but on a computer screen. So it's sort of weird. For Thomas and Jared, I hope you guys aren't too bored. But
It's good to review.
Yeah, so but everyone else and I think Scott, you know some Blender too, right? Dylan definitely knows Blender. Dylan's gonna be chiming in if he wants to. So he's always a pro. So yeah, we have a lot of people in the group that if we got questions, I'm sure one of us will be able to kind of help out. And yeah, so it's kind of exciting. I'm really stoked for this. So it's gonna be cool. Yeah, like I said, let me know if you're stuck. We'll kind of go at a pace that works for everybody. It's F11 to do full screen, right? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we're gonna be talking about terminology today. It's mostly gonna be that, and then we'll just kind of stop when we get there. We'll go over some modeling theory, what's okay and what's not. I'm just realizing out of context that sounds hilarious, but it's really just like what's gonna screw you over in the future if you're doing certain things, and like what's fine. And there's also like little dumb tricks and stuff that you can save a lot of time. There's things like Z fighting and all that. We'll talk about that later. Actually, can someone comment Z fighting, just so I can remember?
Z fighting sounds amazing.
I know. Yeah.
It is.
Let's write that down somewhere.
Yeah, and then I can make a little thing about Z fighting. Yeah. Yeah. So like little tricks. Z fighting's terrible. It looks horrible. You see it a lot in retro games. Like, basically it means that there's two planes in the same exact field and they're freaking out. But you know, that kind of stuff we're gonna learn about more later. We'll go over navigation. Pretty much like today, we might get there. I kind of like to open up Blender if we can, but there's a chance we might not. And it's is like boring as the fundamentals are. If I'm gonna like have an opinion, I think all the pros are incredible at the fundamentals, and that's kind of what sets them apart, because they're usually using like really simple things. Like, they're not going crazy all the time. They just kind of know the basics really well, and like I guess we can try to get to that level. Selecting is huge, because most of 3D modeling, at least what I do and other people do, it's usually just selecting. So if you get good at selecting, you're going to save yourself a ton of time. We'll be learning economic modeling. So that's kind of like modeling in a way that looks high poly, but is cutting polys in areas that you can. So it's kind of like, you know how today when you buy anything, they cut corners everywhere. It sounds like a bad reference, but we kind of want to do that with our modeling. So if you don't see it, if you don't notice it, remove the polys, and then basically every poly that you add, it should be deforming the shape. So that's kind of the idea with economic modeling. And then there's also a component to economic modeling. Is it going to be seen all the time in your scene, or is it not important. Like if it's going to be something that's in the sky super far away, like a bird, and you're not having any close shots on a bird, you might not want that bird to be perfect. So then we'll go low to high poly workflow. And that's essentially the reason why, some people have different workflows, and we'll try to show as many as we can. But the one I'll be focusing on mainly is the low to high poly. The reason why is that at the beginning, it's so much easier to manipulate if you have less polys than it is when you start doing crazy stuff to the surface. Doing things at the right time, starting with the right shapes, understanding different views and sketches and add-ons. So that's going to be the big thing in the future. Is there anything like you guys saw online or whatever that you'd like to kind of focus on? Because I can try to add that if you guys think of it.
I think that'll come as we continue. I just can't think of anything right now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and commenting all the questions and stuff as we go is going to be super helpful. And I'm actually really excited. We have a pretty good group. We only have one spot left on this group actually, because Discord will only do 10 people.
One thing is like doing UVs and texturing and stuff. I'd like to focus on that kind of thing.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm talking a lot about texturing in here, so that's great. But for UVs, perfect. I'll try to expand on that. So that's dope. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is ultra corny, but I have to say it because when you start a program, it freaking sucks. Like I hate it. Ugh. Like for me, learning Blender, I think I had sunk in, I don't know how many hours. It was a lot into 3ds Max, and then learning Blender was like flip everything around. So it's gonna be super frustrating the first couple weeks, and then I found the best way when I got started on it was just to do a little bit every day, because it's kind of like learning the longboard, if you've ever done that, or biking or whatever. It's messed up until your brain, you kind of sleep on it, you wake up and you're like, unless for some reason you're just smarter, because that's how your brain works. And then what to expect in the future, we will get good. It's just there's the eventually clause. So give it a little bit of time. We'll tackle each thing as we go, and definitely focus on the consistency, right? So the idea is that just a tiny bit will always be to binge. I like plants a lot, so I put that plant metaphor in there. If you drown a plant and then you leave it, it's gonna die. And then I also threw this in there later because like training yourself to save is so important, because if you don't have autosave on, and we'll actually, can someone comment that autosave? If you don't have autosave on and you're working and you put like a whole bunch of time in and you're super excited about something, your computer knows it can sense it. It'll just crash. So yeah, I guess like we'll just be spamming Control S as much as we can. Basically, after you do anything you think is cool and important, we'll save it, and then there's another component to it, duplicating at certain stages. It really takes nothing to duplicate it and hide it and like, I don't want to see you again. And if you do that, if you need to revert, you have a copy of whatever that is. So I do that a lot, and that simple trick is like saved me a ton of time. And the idea is when you're duplicating it at a low poly phase, it's a lot easier down the line. So first thing I want to talk about, and I remember this baffled my brain when I first learned to 3D model, was that these views make up everything. And currently what we're looking at, these are all orthographic. And what orthographic means is there's no perspective. It's just like if you could see with perfect non-perspective vision, this is what things would look like in the world. And the weird thing is technically this is more true than anything ever, because perspective is an illusion. Orthographic is always exactly how it is, and it's just weird. But when you model, orthographic is going to be incredibly helpful, because if you select something in the background, you want it to be in the same place, so you're not having to fight with perspective. So this car here, and actually I kind of want to do a little bit about drafting, so I'm going to write that down too. I'm not going to like necessarily teach you guys how to draft, but I'll like let you know how to check it, because like Jared I can I can talk about this. Like you'll find things that don't add up. So I might send a draft or whatever. Someone does a little sketch and it'll be wrong. One of them will be wrong somewhere. And then as the 3D artist, it's kind of like your job to kind of like get the idea of the drawing and then take your own liberties to make it the best thing it can be. So it's kind of tough. And I would like to kind of focus on making stuff from weird views. So say for example, sometimes in the gaming industry you'll get just an isometric drawing. And you know, that covers a lot, but it doesn't cover everything. And then it also doesn't have perspective, and the artist, they also have to try to be thinking of it, what it looks like in their head in 3D, and a lot of artists have trouble with that because you're kind of doing a lot all at once. So as the 3D artist, they have to kind of take that and actually make it work, and it's a bitch. So I guess there's usually a good amount of communication between the guy who made the thing and then the guy who's actually modeling it. So in this example, this is actually rendered out already, these pictures from the car. So it's already been 3D modeled, but before they get to that stage, someone just has to draw it up. They usually will draw a side view, a front view, and a back view and a top view. This is like everything. Sometimes you literally just get a front and a side. So it would be like the side of the car and the front of the car. If you're lucky, you'll get a top view, but the top view is usually overkill for most things. And the back view is just like, unless it's important, you usually won't get it either. So trying to figure out how to connect the dots is a really big thing. And I can try to help you guys with that if we can. So there are some modelers who only use these perspectives in the viewport as they go. I'm not one of them. I like to have the whole thing open and then just kind of move it around. And I was watching a video a while back, and apparently if you're only modeling and your perspective is always fixed, the issue with that is that like if you actually make something in real life as an artist or a sculptor or whatever, like you're always moving your head around and you're twisting and rotating the object, and you can see it in 3D space. But when you're modeling, you can't do that. So you have to try to twist the view around to get a feel for what you're making, right? So that's definitely handy, in my opinion, is to be spinning around the model lots and zooming in and out and just looking with different views, turning perspective on, turning it off. And then that's kind of good because it'll help you kind of get a better idea in your head for what the form is like, right? Okay, so any questions on that?
Nope.
Nice, okay. Fair enough. And it's kind of a silly thing to start with, but I think you spend so much time with it, it's kind of good to go over.
No, yeah, hell yeah.
Cool, thank you. So then the next thing is terminology for vertex, edge, face, object, and I wrote down the hotkeys for what they are. So in Blender, the big difference is now you can go right to it, like 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, and 3 for face. So what the heck is that stuff? Basically in 3D, you can think of 3D like Illustrator but with another dimension, right? So all it does is you have a point to a point to a point. So like you got here, there's a total of 8 vertexes, there's a bunch of edges and like 6 faces, I think? I don't know, I'm not good at counting. Anyway. So the thing is that you use different things for different purposes to get what you want. Most of the time, we kind of want to stick in face selection mode. When you're using edges, it's incredibly handy for different things, and I like to stay away from vertexes. Because vertexes are only good in very select situations when you really want to fine-tune things. Essentially, a face will give you the most movement with less destruction. An edge will kind of let you select certain rings, and they're quite handy, but a vertex is just like you can mess up a lot of stuff. And then sometimes if you have back facing turned on, you'll select things in the back. It's every 3D modeler's nightmare because you'll be working on something and you find out you fucked up the back part of it and it's horrible. So then object is the whole thing, like the whole shape that you're making, that's object selection. In 3ds Max, it's more of a thing. In Blender, it's kind of like implied, but like you have to use a different way to get to the object. So I think that's with L, and that's what Thomas taught me. So you use L, it'll select it, and then you can grab the object. It saves you a ton of time. With Blender 2.8, I don't know if this is a new feature, but when you hit L and you have seams turned on, it'll keep it to the seam. But we'll talk about seams later. That's UV unwrapping. So is everybody good with this? Because this is kind of like the very building blocks of 3D.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, perfect.
I can feel my brain expanding.
Then the next thing is normals. So, we have this thing here called a face, right? And that face has a direction to it facing out. So a normal is exactly the direction of that, right? So it's like, you put these things in a certain spot, and that's the way it's facing, and that's how things are computed in 3D, right? It figures out the normal using, pretty sure it's calculus, right, Thomas? Yeah. Anyways, it doesn't matter how the computer does it. It just has these little, and if you look at the red dots here, these are normals. Now, part of economic modeling is understanding how to kind of cheap smooth things. So like there's a thing in 3D modeling called smoothing groups, and it basically says transition between these normals in a smooth way. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, so normals have two directions. There's an out direction and an in direction. If you look at the bottom right one, it's flipped, and computers only want to calculate one of those directions because it's less work. So technically, if you were to go inside something in 3D and you look out, you can usually see through it. But if you go on the outside of it and you look at it, like here, it's opaque. So if you ever get to the stage when you're 3D modeling and it looks like this, it's because your normals are flipped, and then we can kind of figure that out. So the cool thing is getting your polys down low. Smoothing groups can help a lot. Like I know for trees specifically, you can like have sometimes a tree that's literally just eight of these faces in a circle. And then if you tell it to smooth, it'll just kind of calculate that smoothness, and then you can add detail in other ways. Yeah, so that's about all we need to know now. Do you guys kind of get what normals do?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably through practice I would understand it a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably just leave it as that, though.
Yeah, all a normal is it tells the computer which direction the surface is going of the face. Yeah, that's about it. The next thing we're going to be looking at is topology, polyflow, n-gons, tris, quads, and poles. So the biggest thing that's going to help us is using proper topology. If you have weird topology, selecting is a pain in the ass. Manipulating gets gross. Everything gets gross. So although you can actually see the topology when it's in something like a game engine, or you can be rendering a little clip or whatever, this is going to allow us to kind of limit issues like rendering issues, and we can change it later easier if we want. The thing about 3D modeling is usually stuff isn't very non-destructive. There's programs like Rhino and all that use like booleans and focus more on the vector side of things. But at the NURBS, is that what it's called? NURBS?
That's what Rhino uses.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so like Rhino, you can kind of tweak things and all that. And I have a plugin that we can play with later on, and it uses curves, which is kind of like, I guess, NURBS. But at the end of the day, we're usually stuck with having to deal with when we make something, it's usually kind of like set, and then we have to build off the next thing. So kind of, I guess there's a bit of a component to holistically thinking through. Like before you start it, you kind of have to think, okay, what shape is going to help the most? Where do I want it to go? And then, yeah. And this just all comes with practice. So using the right things at the right time is going to help. So Jared, I'm going to call you up. Why do you want quads?
What do you want? Quads?
Mm-hmm.
Has to do with the edge flow and when you get to the unwrapping stage, it doesn't like to flow around well with triangles.
Yes, yeah.
You've got lines that are broken at T intersections that don't go all the way around the circle, so...
Yeah, that was perfect. So essentially quads allow you to, I don't have a picture of it, but I can show you when we get there. It'll allow you to make a complete selection in a loop if you have a quad. If you have a triangle, it breaks the direction of the flow, which is polyflow or edge flow or yeah. N-gons. Okay, N-gons are like one of those weird controversial subjects in the 3D modeling world, and some people are like disgusted by them. If you post on like Sketchfab or something and it has an N-gon, they'll be like, oh, gross, and they just like bash your model, even though it can be amazing.
Certain game engines can't even recognize them though.
Yeah, exactly, because everything gets triangulated anyways once you put it into a game engine.
Unreal can recognize them and turn them into tries. Some game engines can't. That's generally why it's frowned upon.
Yes, yeah.
Like for our purpose, they're absolutely fine.
Yeah, and technically Blender, as it is, when you do an N-gon, it's actually triangulating it. You just can't see it. But that's how it tries to figure it out. Is it makes a bunch of nasty geometry, and that's why N-gons can get disgusting. In fact, I'm gonna have to remember to post bad N-gon pic.
Yeah, okay. Use a certain workaround for making N-gons less gross.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually just gonna look up right now why N-gons can be really bad, and then at other times I actually purposely use N-gons to make it better. So before we get too far into N-gon, what is an N-gon? This is an N-gon. See the thing with the red? It just means there's not 4 vertexes. So anytime there's more than that, there's a bunch of like angles that can be made. If you cut it like that, it doesn't exactly know what it should be. Yeah, okay, here we go. This is like, I'll just actually post this. If you want to go real deep into N-gons, this is a good video to watch. But let's take a peek. So getting around
this.
That's a crucial thing to understand.
Yeah, Gleb Alexander. That's a really good example of an N-gon. So you can see how Unreal is actually doing this triangulation. Blender, sorry, is doing this triangulation thing. So that's actually what the computer has to do to figure it out. And right there is an example. It's trying to figure out how it wants to be shaded, but it doesn't really know how to do it. There's another really good example where it's just like, oh, gross. Look at the shading. It's super jank. So the idea with N-gons is if you are going to use them, it should be perfectly flat. If it's not perfectly flat or curving evenly, there's a couple ways you can get away with it. If it's not doing that, it just doesn't have enough information to know how to smooth it, right? So sometimes people get in horrible situations with N-gons. I'm actually going to be showing you guys a couple tricks to use N-gons to help you with selecting and making things. And then the idea is at the end, as long as it's flat and it's even and there's no bending with the N-gon, it should be okay. But it's very situational. So let me open up Blender. I'm just going to show you a quick example of polyflow. I'll see if I can get it to work. Okay, so I got my shape here. Go into tab, hit 2 to do this, and I'm actually going to want to extrude this out, extrude that out. Okay, cool. So we're going to select this in face mode. Okay, so if we like extrude this, right? See how I can do that by selecting that loop, okay? So this is in a very basic way, we have some edge flow happening because these are all quads and it knows that there's a loop and a ring around here. So if I extrude it again, you'll see that it's just the ones I selected. Same goes for this. I can do this as a complete selection. You can see how it kind of knows to follow this path. And there's a thing in Blender called nearest path. So if I go control and click, it'll go straight to the thing. But if I start making nasty triangles, watch this. I just made a triangle in there. If I want to select down to here, see, there you go. Okay, look at that. It didn't know to go this. So it broke the flow of it. Sometimes it'll kind of figure out how to go around it because Blender 2.8 is getting pretty smart. But triangles essentially, and especially if you have n-gons and things more than a quad, it'll break the flow. So you have to just kind of reselect it, and it can be a pain. And then other times you get bigger issues. So, you know, and this is kind of like what we're going to be doing at the start, just making weird shapes. You don't have to have any purpose for the shape. But you see that? I tried to select the loop in this stupid triangle. The other one's fine. This one's like, no, I don't want to think about that. Blender just just noped out. So that's something that we can remove, and there we go. Look at this. So if I do it again, I remove that triangle. I'm gonna go face, inset, yeah, and then boom. So it kind of gives you an idea why edge flow is so important. Yeah, so I'll close it down. We'll be talking more about that later. Like the whole time as we're making stuff, we're really going to be thinking of the bad way to make things and the good way to make things, and how we can cut down in time, like a lot. For instance, there's a type of modeling I kind of learned a little while back, but it's called sort of like bevel workflow. You go Shift A, select the cylinder that you want, and then, you know, we'll get into it. So this is an n-gon right there. This whole thing is a massive n-gon, but because there's nothing inside it, it allows us to kind of do stuff like this, which is super cool. We can inset it, you know, we can even go into it, and then we can inset it again, we can bring it back out. And then by selecting edges, we can bevel it, curve it. So yeah, like all kinds of fun stuff. And very quickly we made a weird shape. So that's kind of the importance of edge flow. And then even then, if we try to select this, see, it actually knows that that's a thing. See, the n-gon disrupts it, but this whole path.
You're starting to lag.
Oh, really? Okay. So this whole path is complete. How am I now for sound quality?
You're good for me.
Yep, you're good now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Anyways, so what's wrong here? If we look at this couch, what's wrong with this image? And Dylan, you can't say because you already know.
The topology looks kind of weird.
Oh, which one? First, second, third, fourth, fifth.
The second one?
This one?
Like, yeah, not all of the shapes are, let's say, the same. There's like some weird edges going on the side. I think that might be those triangles you've mentioned.
Yep. There's definitely triangles in this. So I would say those triangles are bad, because if I selected this loop, it'll go whoop, and then it won't know what to do, so it actually will deviate and then go nowhere. So that's kind of gross. Anyone else? What else with this image do we think is disgusting?
It all looks weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a trick question. It's all terrible. Everything here.
The first one looks like it's pretty heavy on, well, it's not economically friendly. I mean, because if you compare the original to the final one, to the optimized one, there's a huge difference in polygons.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So
it's very inefficient.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, totally. And the thing that they did here is they decimated it, but at what cost? That's kind of how I see it. It's like, if you plan on never doing anything with that again, it might be fine, but I don't even know if it's going to be faster because of these disgusting n-gons and just the topology is so bad.
Decimation, that's terrible because it's got n-gons.
Exactly. And the funny thing is the chair to the left of it, although it has those gross corners like you're talking about, Ralph, it's not the worst topology ever. Like you could really do a better job if you decimated it yourself. You could just delete a bunch of, see, all of these loops, they really don't need to be there for the most part. Like you could take quite a few out and you wouldn't even notice a difference in the change of shape. And then what they did is they cut it down in the next one and made it all triangles. And because it's all triangles, you can't do anything with it. Like forget selecting, forget. The only thing you could do with it at this point is maybe sculpt it. Maybe. Because when you sculpt, it's typically, I think, triangle workflow as it is. But it's a totally different way of modeling. So anyways, it's just good to look at other people's topology, and you guys will get super judgmental at the end of this course.
What's wrong with the fourth chair? It's the one beside the final optimized one, that blue one.
Yeah, what's wrong with
What's wrong with
that?
that one?
You know, I've looked at this picture, and I think what they did is they only showed some of the polys, because there's definitely some other polys going on here, because it says it's the same pretty much amount of faces. Anyways, let's not look at this too much. It's pretty gross.
On the comment about sculpting is all quads.
Oh, it is? Okay. Because I know some sculpting programs, I think, do triangle.
That's Mudbox,
Oh, yeah. Well, we don't want to use Mudbox.
which is trash anyways.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, especially when Blender 2.8 is like, it's so good in sculpting now compared to before. There's just no reason to touch Mudbox.
Rational quads.
Yeah. So, the next thing we're gonna learn about is poly count. So there's LODs, hero items, low versus high, and essentially, I guess, okay, let's do another what's wrong here. What's wrong in this image? There's one thing that's wrong, in my opinion. In the top bunny image, I guess. I guess there's two things that's wrong, but I'll talk about the other one.
I guess the fact that they're using triangles instead of quads.
Okay, yeah, that's actually, I didn't think of that, so that's a third one. Yeah, triangles are gross, but the game engine does actually, because it only uses triangles, it is easier for the game engine to make automatic LODs out of triangles in a weird way. But it's just we can't work with it. We can't do anything with triangles. What else do you guys see?
Just how heavy it is? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, is 69,000 triangles, or is that
Yeah, it.
like?
It's fairly unnecessary.
Yes. Because if take a look at the two bunnies, do you actually see a change in the silhouette? If you only look at the silhouette of the one on the left and the one that has 2,502, like, is there actually a change in the silhouette?
Oh no.
Like barely any, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with that, is there's no need for it ever, even if it gets close, because unless you're doing a Disney movie and you want microscopic detail, because that's just how that stuff is. You use way too many polys in that stuff because they don't care. It's being rendered. Doesn't matter. But you know what? The future of cartoons and stuff, I think actually people will start caring more about poly count, because with live ray tracing and things like that, they're now rendering live, and they have to consider performance a lot more than they did before. So in my opinion, this 69,000 poly bunny is absurd. It's stupid. They shouldn't have it there at all. The bunny that's 76 triangles, I think, yeah, it makes sense for off in the distance, because when it's very, very far away, you really can't tell. However, the next, I guess, step you could do, and it is tough, because if it's animated, it's a very different thing, but you could actually replace that with a flat plane that's an image. And you could have like 212 or whatever it is pixels, right? And it would be like super low cost, and it would actually have a better silhouette than this crazy bunny has on the right. So yeah, I guess just thinking about LODs. The nice thing is we don't have to make our own LODs for the most part. Like Unreal does that automatically. If you have good polyflow and good topology, it has an easier time understanding how to make a smaller version of it, which is really cool. So that's another reason why you want good polys and topology. Yeah, so 69,000 is just like ludicrous. All right, see you, Thomas.
Bye.
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 So yeah, we don't really need 69,000 ever. To be honest, if you have a character that you want a good amount of detail on, you can do it in 40 to about 20,000 polys. And if you're really wanting it to be friendly, you can keep it to like 3,000, 2,000. It just really depends on what you're trying to do. Now the funny,
Generally, if you're working in really high polys too, you can bake down that detail onto a low poly model as well. So it's only useful to have polys in the game engine as long as it's adding actual volume.
yes, yeah. So it's the silhouette thing that we're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
so you can always use your high poly models to bake the normals onto a low poly and they'll look identical.
Absolutely, yeah. That is like the best practice for adding information, and it uses those normals that we're talking about earlier to put information on it while saving a lot of polys.
Yeah, like I'll regularly work in 7 million polys up until like 16 million.
Yeah, no, totally.
But I always bake it down onto something that's maybe 2,000.
And I forgot the exact numbers, but weirdly enough, we have to remember too, textures are super heavy too. There's certain ways in the game engine and all that we can tell textures to be a little bit more friendly. But otherwise, if we have a 4K texture or image, it's actually sometimes easier on the computer to think of something that's a bit more high poly. So keeping your textures reasonable, usually 2K or 1K textures are great. Once you go above 4K, it's pretty nasty. So, but we'll talk a little bit more. I have a slide for that. So, anyways, the bottom one is actually pretty darn good. Like looking at this is like really nice LODs. I think, if anything, they could cut down radial. The amount, like this loop doesn't need to be here. This loop doesn't need to be here. You guys know what a loop is, right?
No.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. Loop and rings. I don't know if I actually have a thing for that. I don't, so I'll just show you right now. So a loop is, if we go to here, this is a loop. Essentially, it's a selection following the flow of the edges, and then it should loop around. Like here, you'll see it perfectly. This is a nice loop. Here's another loop. Yeah, so like this is a loop, 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 and we can decimate it and see that's what I was talking about right there. And an edge ring, that's an edge ring. So it means they actually don't flow, but it goes around another loop. So it's kind of like it follows a perpendicular loop. Edge rings are super duper handy, and I love them. You just have to click in the right spot to get them. So that's the difference between a loop and a ring. Do we kind of get that?
Somewhat. I think
so, yeah.
I think as I get hands-on, I'll further understand it more.
Okay.
So like, is it just specific to the axis, or like it goes over? So like a loop will go over the Z and a ring will go, like.
Kind of, but not. Sorry, I'll just.
No.
Okay, I got it.
It's parallel versus perpendicular.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if this is 2D, if it's only 2D, we're looking at it. This is a loop. It follows the direction of the edges. So it goes doop doop. This is a vertex, right? Vertex. Edge is the whole thing. Right? This is all an edge, and then edge, right? So the idea is it follows the flow of the edges going like this
Parallel. Okay.
all the way around. So this is a loop, right? Loop. And you can think of loops because they're connected. A ring is not. It's not connected, but it's kind of connected in a way. So you can think of like perpendicular. You got that direction. So it'll go alongside a loop. But if you did something like this, right, still following these, that's a ring. But if you notice, that's actually, they're not touching. But it follows the flow of this. So like it would be like technically actually coming off of it. So that's a ring. These would be considered a ring.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Does that kind of make sense?
Noted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, cool. So we are constantly playing with loops and rings like non-stop, and we're doing different things to kind of mess around with them. Okay, so next thing, maps. So kind of like what Dylan was talking about, we use different maps for different reasons, and it allows the weird kind of like pixely, without a map or a texture or whatever, it'll look terrible. Basically, it just makes it. Some people call texture painting turd polishing. So the 3D artist will make a turd and then someone polishes it, makes it beautiful. But that's not always how it is. But it's kind of funny. So yeah, like right now we're looking at a combination of different maps, and it forms this kind of this little material here. Each texture is going to have a channel, right? So we know that an image is composed of RGB, right? And then RGB tells the pixel how bright to be, right? So the red pixel can go between 0 and 1. At least in Unreal, it's 0 to 1. Some other things is like 0 to 255. But you're playing with the scale of 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1. And depending on, actually, yeah, I'll have to show channels. Sorry. Mask. So I'm going to look up channels mask for you guys so you can actually see what the separate channels look like. The reason why I'm talking about this is you can actually pack 3D grayscale images into a normal image file and save a lot of performance. You know what? It's probably just easier for me to open up Photoshop and show you guys because it's a weird specific thing. So what picture do we want here, Scott?
Search hot dog log.
Thank you. Hot dog log. Oh my god, it's perfect.
That's a legit thing. What do you know?
Just looking at
That's fucking amazing.
Oh my god.
Looks delicious.
I'm super happy. I didn't know someone made that. Okay, so this is CMYK, which is not helpful at all. This is for printing, but I'll change it.
Change it in the image settings.
Yeah, mode, RGB color, flatten it. Okay, so this is what it looks like with all three. When we look at red, it's going to be different from blue, quite a lot. So that means there's a lot of red happening in the hot dogs, and then the background it's dark. Over here, background is still dark because it's actually just a dark background. So you see that each image all the time, if you're looking at it and it has color, it's going to have 3 channels. So the cool thing is in 3D, you get this weird looking thing on the right that has like these crazy colors and stuff. That's RGB packing. So someone has gone ahead and manually inserted a grayscale image that's different in each channel. So we'll look at what these different things do. So basically, we're looking at PBR workflow, which is photo-based rendering. Going back to images, basically, if we want things to run fast, and most of the time you're kind of locked to this scale, it's factors of 2. I think James called it a computer number one time, and I love that. So it's small image being 215 by 215 is incredibly tiny. My personal favorite is 2048. It's usually fairly high res without being too heavy. Then there's 4096 and 8192. Those get heavy, but a 4K TV would be about 4096. And an old school computer monitor from a few years ago would be 1024. But yeah, basically just understanding when to use those for different things and how to save on a little bit of resources. So the first map in PBR workflow is called base color. So PBR is photo-based rendering, meaning they figured out a way to take a material and strip it into many layers. So when they strip it into layers, each layer has to have only one set of information in it. So if you look at this texture, it has too much stuff in it. There's some shiny areas, there's some areas with shadows, there's no metallic stuff happening, but it's so to get the diffuse color, you want to remove everything except for just the color of it. It's really weird, but it's super cool. And the reason why is when you throw that into the computer is going to do the lighting itself. It's going to re-change the shadows. So if you have a shadow on top of a shadow, it looks pretty stupid. So you want to take that shadow out. Yeah. Next thing is an alpha map. An alpha map is essentially a way to take a plane, like it just this is literally just one face.
Yep.
And then cut out stuff so it looks like there's a really complex silhouette going on. So this is called an atlas here. These things have different areas cut out. So this has no alpha, and this has alpha affecting white areas. You can have an alpha be a little bit transparent or fully transparent. The whole point of alpha mask is just to cut out things you don't want. So it's handy because you can have leaves. Leaves are like the most handy thing with that. The next thing is normal map. So probably one of the most important things actually that we'll be working with is a normal map. The reason how it works is it goes back to that RGB thing that we're talking about. And in 3D we have XYZ, and if you actually look at Blender, let me pull it up. There's a reason why X, Y, and Z is red, blue, and green. Typically RGB and the three-dimensional coordinates are usually corresponding. So
what?
Yeah, isn't it crazy?
Go on. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the crazy thing about normal maps, and in fact, I'm actually going to copy this image so we can look at it. So a normal map is telling the area where the texture is over to displace in a certain way. So it's actually bending those normals in a new direction to add fake detail that isn't there. So if we look at this, when we go red, we're not just looking at a red map anymore. We're actually looking at RGB X. We're looking at the X dimension. So white means.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. It's crazy.
That's so cool. Continue,
Yeah.
please.
Oh, I love it. And this is how water is made, and all this stuff is you have to manipulate these channels. So here, a perfect neutral gray. I'm just gonna draw it on top of here. A perfect neutral gray will look like, I don't know, let's say hue saturation black 50%. Okay, so if I draw this, that's perfect neutral gray. So that means that in the X dimension, it's not moving left or right. I'm just gonna say left and right is X shift. But if it's white, it means that it's moving all the way right. So you can actually see on the rock, it's actually moving right. And let me just draw. I'll point it out. It's really cool. So in these areas, you can see the rock is fully facing right. Okay.
Okay.
Now, if we look at the dark areas, the rock is actually fully facing left, right? So it's telling that dimension to be displaced. But the cool thing is if we look at the green one, it looks like, yeah, this is now up and down. So actually, this is now the top, right? Top. Top. Any areas that are white are top. The black areas are on the bottom now. So it's actually just building the shape that doesn't exist in real 3D. It's cool.
That's so sick.
Yeah, I know. I love it. And then if we go blue, this is in and out information. So I'm gonna try to draw a like dimensional arrow. You know what I mean? So
so it's going. Think of it going into the screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's kind of like a height map in a bit of a way. Like a normal map does everything. So if you need to cut on a lot of stuff, do not cut on the normal map because it's one of the most important things. Yeah. So you can typically in the blue channel it needs to be super neutral. If it's not super neutral, it's a bad normal map because blue means distortion. If you have a lot of white, it means it's really pushing out, and there's some math about this. Is you have these three directions, and you know, if you figure out this is like calculus or whatever, but if you average these three things, you'll get a vector in a new direction, and that's your new normal. So it's kind of cool. I really enjoy normal maps. I think they're really fun.
Yeah, that is nuts. I didn't realize it was all by color.
Yeah.
This is super cool.
Yeah, we're going over that again, right? Because I think I kind of missed. What the blue and red channels do.
We'll be doing it lots. Kind of a weird thing, like in our game, actually, you really don't use normals that much. The normals are weird because they have to be super clean. Otherwise, it'll draw a line on everything, and it's kind of weird. But that's different. Normals, like if you ever see stylized games, I'm gonna try to show you a stylized normal. It's kind of weird. So a stylized normal map is usually very sharp. Like there's a great example right there. You can see that this like weird kind of bluey, this weird kind of bluey like neutral color. Oh god, I actually pasted it in the blue channel. That was cool. So that I actually just packed it in RGB packing. That's what I did. Okay, there we go. Now you can see it. So like the whole idea with stylized is they want only specific areas to be bending, and then all of this is like not being displaced at all. So they in games like Overwatch and stuff like that, they want these edges to be very sharp, and everything else needs to be normal usually. So it's kind of and with stylized games, typically they make their own normal maps, and it's doable. It's just a pain in the ass, a huge pain in the ass. Okay. So the cool thing about that is you can take an image that has this amount of detail or whatever, and then you can bake out, you can make a low res model and a high res model, and you can bake out that information. This is what Dylan was talking about. You can save it as an image, and then take that image and then put it back onto the low res thing, and you can get the same detail it had before with almost no polys. So it's super cool. Then this is the roughness channel in PBR workflow. Roughness basically means, is it shiny in that spot or is it really matte in the spot? And if you look at this dude on the right, you can see there's a... Yeah, there's like certain areas that are full of dirt and all that, so that would be white, I guess. So the white areas are not reflective. The black areas on this guy are fully reflective, meaning that it would be shiny. That's about it. Like roughness can be absolutely huge if you're trying to do like very realistic looking models. If you don't have a roughness map, it's not going to look as real as it could, because things like fingerprints and smudges, any of that stuff is done through roughness. So if you want your surface to look like it's actually been used and realistic, you want a roughness map. This one's creepy. This is ambient occlusion. So essentially what that means is, you know how I showed you that picture a while back of this one? There's no light in it, right? Well, when you make a PBR material, there's programs that'll do it for you, and I can show you how to do it. When you make a PBR material, it'll take that lighting and put it onto a separate image, which is what this is. So it just basically makes sure it's separated. It separates the light from the actual color. And there's ways it calculates this. Like if you make a model and you bake out ambient occlusion, it basically will project a bunch of photons evenly all the way around it, like computer photons or whatever. And then it figures out where the dark spots are, and then where the more lit areas are. So if you look at this person, typically eyes are a little bit, like around the eye, whatever that is, sockets. There's not a lot of light bouncing in there compared to like maybe the cheeks. And this model in particular has super deep dark cracks, and they're like black. So it's kind of interesting. So the computer can use this to figure out how to make dynamic lighting look really realistic. So it can go, okay, well, I want a shadow here. It'll look at the map and go, oh, okay, cool, that's where the shadow should be, and so it uses this to help it do a lot of work for it. So it's kind of cool. We'll be done soon. Like after I go over the maps, I think we'll call it a night. Is that cool with you guys, or how are we doing?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So then, this is metallic, and I actually think this is a really cool image because it shows the final result, and it shows a couple of the other things we're looking at. Like, looking at the albedo map blows my brain, because I'm like, that's what the colors look like if you strip everything out of it. If you take the shading, you take the reflectivity and the metal and everything out of it, that's what the color would actually look like. Even though it looks like a pastel mess, like it's weird. And then if you look at the metalness, this means metalness is the one thing in PBR. There's there's two types of materials. There's a metal material and a non-metal material. So metal has different properties, meaning that it's shiny, it's reflective, and it kind of like the way the colors bounce back is very specific to a metal, right? Everything else, like plastic isn't a metal object at all, so it looks very different. So what a metal map does is tell it where to be full metal and where to be non. So if you have rust on an object, that rust is now making it less metal because the rust is over top of it. If you look at the roughness, it's how shiny it is, right? So that's what we're talking about before, and then they combine, and then they look like this. Why is it not going next? There we go. Height is kind of like what we're talking about with the blue channel in a normal map. Except height is specifically for distorting the surface in a manner that adds a lot of geometry that's not there. So typically, if you've ever heard of tessellation or parallax occlusion, that's done with a height map. And if you don't have a height map, it can't do that. So the idea is that you put this extra detail in the height map, and only when you're close in a certain spot, it brings that out and it distorts it. So you can have landscapes made with a height map. You can have all this cool stuff. And the thing about a height map is that black means no elevation, and white means full elevation. So this image that you're seeing on the right here, it's coming from this image on the left. And it's kind of weird, but like you can kind of see how the mountains are formed from these weird like kind of cloud shapes. How do you guys feel about that?
Pretty good, yeah.
Good.
So a PBR, what's PBR material? What's the long form PBR?
Yes, so photo-based rendering.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it. But the idea is that PBR happened, I think it was like 2015 or something like that. And industry like lost their minds over it because they completely changed the way that they render things. So
Okay.
the reason why I don't have specular map in here is because of PBR. So specular is an old way of calculating shininess, where now it's called roughness. I don't know why, but they seem to like it more than it's like a group of people were like, we need to make a standard, and that's what they did.
Okay.
And then now, PBR is getting replaced with ray tracing, even though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, even though ray tracing still needs PBR to work, which is really funny. But yeah, anyways, that's how trends are, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
This one's weird. It's called Cavity. So Cavity is like a more intense version of AO. It's kind of like AO and a height map mixed together. So the idea is that it tells you the height of how things go in and out of the shape, and it tells you the shading. So it's useful. We probably won't use it, but just so you guys know it exists.
It's available automatically in Blender 2.8.
No way, really?
Yeah, I think they switched away from AO into Cavity.
Holy shit. Because I know that you can do Cavity for literally just working in it. You can turn Cavity on. But I didn't know you can bake it out too?
I don't know about that. I know you can view it at the very least.
Okay, I'm gonna look into that because that'd be cool. So the next one, like we probably won't touch on it, but it's cool to know it's out there. It's a flow map. So what it is it tells, man, like we're gonna have to watch a video to get this, but it basically tells an object how to move or flow. It's all witchcraft to me. It's really cool. It's kind of like normals. It's just as wild. So like if I go YouTube, so the idea you have an image that's only consisting of red and green information. And do you see it on the left? It's actually like flowing, like bubbling and stuff, which is super cool.
How is that not a shader?
But yeah, that's the weird thing, right? It's used in shaders, but it's also used in materials, and it's also used in particles. But yeah, you can make a material do that if you're into that kind of thing.
That's freaking cool.
Yeah, isn't that wild? And that's all of this is coming from this image.
A static image.
Just a static image. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah, right. And the
I'll link that video. I mean, I'll honestly, I'll just watch the video.
Yeah. I'll bloop. There we go. And the cool thing is people use it for water and pools, because a flow map can actually tell the water how to flow around objects and stuff. And if you ever go into Skyrim or whatever with some mods, they'll actually have, like, if you place a rock, it'll tell the water to go around the rock, and that's all done with a flow map. But because the flow is only basically left and right and up and down distortion, you don't need the blue channel at all. So it usually looks kind of greeny and weird. So that's why technically this weird musty green color is perfectly neutral in a flow map. It's weird. Okay, so we're done maps. Yeah, this might be a good time to stop. How do you guys feel?
Yeah, let's do that. I have to wake up early.
Cool. All right, well, if we want to chat or whatever, but it's kind of late, so.
Dope. Thanks for the lesson, though, dude. Sick.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to tomorrow for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's recap.
Clap all at once. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there you go. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
See you guys
everybody.
tomorrow night.
Peace. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.